So I would like to thank you all for joining and for organizing this event on behalf of the International Biogeography Society. And this is part of the IBS's agenda to increase communication and connection within our network. And we're also continuing this idea with the Vicky Funk lectures, seminars in the future that will begin soon and will feature a lot of interesting biogeographers as well. So thank you.
Shall I take over? Shall I introduce the session? Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Thank you, Karen, for setting this up and doing all the logistics behind this. Thank you, Julia, for that introduction and for allowing us to host this session in this wonderful week. Welcome, everybody, to our session, which is entitled Expression and Variety in Science Communication. Thank you all for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are in the world. We're really excited to host this session. My name is Aaron O'Day, and I'm a researcher at the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute. Actually, let me just see if I can share my screen because I have something to share. I should have something to share. Excuse me here. So this session is called Expression and Variety in Science Communication. My name is Aaron O'Day. I'm a researcher at the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute, and this session is co-hosted by Suzette Flantua, who is a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Bergen. First of all, let me thank all of the presenters and the panelists that have offered to give us their unique insights into the worlds of science communication today. I also want to thank Suzette for proposing this session in the first place and doing all of the really disagreeable logistical stuff behind the scenes. So thank you, Suzette, for doing that. And finally, I want to thank the International Biogeography Society for hosting this International Humboldt Day, which is actually Humboldt Week in a sense. What a terrific selection of talks there are out there. I'm not sure if you've seen any, but really, if you get the chance, have a look and see if there's something for everybody out there, and they've been fantastic so far. Okay, so on to today's session. We have expression and variety in science communication, like I said. And the reason we called it this is because what we wanted to do is to highlight and embrace the many different and unique ways there are to communicate science, which of course is a really important thing, especially these days. And I think it's important to remind ourselves that good science and good science communication share one important thing in common, and that is that they are most effective when they tell stories to their audience and that the audiences can relate to those stories. And I think all of our panelists today are expert storytellers in their own unique way. And they communicate their science in a unique way that reflects their own skills and their own styles. And that's kind of what we wanted to embrace by bringing a diversity of science storytellers together and allowing them to show us their examples of the kinds of engaging approaches that exist and that can communicate not only scientific discoveries, but also the process of science itself, which is really important. And so with that, we're absolutely delighted to invite 5 scientific communicators today. The panelists will start with Ian Cook-Tapia, who is an independent scientific reporter and visual artist from Panama. Then we'll have Julia Heinen, who's a PhD student in Copenhagen and a wonderful scientific videographer, so watch out for her work. Beatriz Diaz-Pauli is a researcher at the Bergen University, and she is adept at bringing complex scientific concepts about evolution into the hands of young people in really great ways. Next up would be Catalina Giraldo, who I know because she worked on a video with Suzette, which is wonderful. And she's a skilled videographer, filmmaker, who I'm really hoping to learn from today too. And finally, we will have Carlos Guarnizo. He's a researcher at the Universidad de los Andes in Colombia, and he works on frogs there, but he's also the creator of the independent science communication initiative, Ciencia Café, and I'm really looking forward to hearing about him today. So just a quick format about how we'll do this. Today, each of these 5 panelists will speak for 10 to 15 minutes, and we'll leave some time for questions. Once each presentation is over, if you have a specific question for that presenter, you can ask your question. But if your question is more of a broad question that all of the panelists could answer, then I recommend you wait until the end of all the sessions, and then we could open it up for a more broader discussion amongst all of the panelists, and the audience can collaborate as well with that too. There's 2 ways to ask questions. The Q&A button, so you can write your question down, and then I think that we'll be able to transfer that to the panelists, or we'll just read it out for them. The other way, which is more preferable, I think, is to press the raise your hand button, which is here, and I think we'll be able to allow you to speak, and your question will be heard that way. So with that, let me introduce the first speaker. First panelist is Senor Ian Cook-Tapia, who is a scientific reporter and a visual artist from the scrublands of Panama, but he's currently residing in South Wales, of course. That's where all people from the scrublands of Panama end up. And he is a strong believer in using emotional storytelling to deliver really important social and scientific messages. And he's particularly interested, I think, in developing collaborations between artists and scientists. He's bridging that gap, and that's a really important gap to bridge. So thank you, Ian. We're really looking forward to hearing your presentation today. If you would like to join now, I think you'll be able to share your screen.
I will.
Thank you, Ian.
Yeah. Can people see that? Let me see, kind of view.
We can see it. Thank you, Ian.
Perfect. Okay, so my name is Ian Cook-Tapia. Buenos dias. Good day. Boreda. Welcome to the talk. And I think I titled this thing sort of quickly, Co-Creating Stories Using Science and Visual Arts. What I want to get across is actually 2 main ideas. One being the difference between telling visual stories that teach science and teaching science by telling visual stories. So, but before I get into that, let's start with a little backstory. Like most people, I think I started my science journey with dinosaur toys, which early on really got me into learning all the cool dino names, and also through edutainment video games, such as I remember this guy, Henry the Lizard. But as I grew older, actually, it's difficult for me to actually remember anything I learned from these mediums over time. And at the same time, I grew up in an environment that was surrounded by scientists, where in my dad's house was always a welcome abode to white bearded biologists, sunburned anthropologists, mud covered archaeologists, and sometimes a sociologist would just somehow appear in the kitchen. Nobody knows how they got in. So very early on, I had this surrounding idea of what science was and the research around it, but I didn't actually come to understand certain topics. For example, how hunter-gatherer societies eventually stopped wandering and settled down to invent agriculture. I knew about it, but it never clicked with me. That was until last year what I found the 2016 The Flintstones comic published by DC Comics. Specifically issue 8, in which we follow Wilma's backstory in a hunter-gatherer tribe, specifically an event in which Wilma's mother realizes that their migratory routes took them through the same areas where the previous years they had left seeds about that over time gave them more and more food every couple of years that came by. So this realization essentially led Wilma's mother to create agriculture in the story, which in turn created a complete change in the relationship the tribe had to each other, changed the hierarchical structures from one of egalitarian community into a male-dominated, new structure, which in turn created a very personal story for Wilma, in which she had to escape that reality to make her own life. And I remember sitting after finishing this story and going, oh wow, I get it now. I now understand how hunter-gatherers settled down and started agriculture. But why did it take this type of story and 20 years for me actually to sort of get it at a deep emotional level? And there's some simple answers that we can find in, for example, the book, The Science of Storytelling, in which Will Storr tells us that storytelling is the primordial information sharing tool. That humans, as we domesticated ourselves to be incredibly social animals with brains particularly equipped to navigate complex social environments, we are by default attracted to one another and certain story characteristics that exist across all cultures. In the Flintstones comics, there's 3 of the ideas that Storr espouses in this book that sort of identify. These are not all of them, but the ones that stood out to me was that people are interested in other people, specifically what made them the person they are today. And usually what made them who they are is a sequence of events with an anticipated but unknown resolution. And novelty is very interesting to humans in the sense that, to me, this story presented in a Flintstones comic, which just blew my mind. So it just helped me really understand what was going on. Well, I do believe that Mark Russell and Steve Pugh, the creators of the story, were just looking to create a good story. But by what they did was really understand the subject matter of the Flintstones, which is essentially early Homo sapiens, and the narrative possibilities this gave them, and combined with narrative principles of storytelling that gave them the ability to just create what I like to call incidental learning, which we'll come back to later. So this is a quote I really like. When you have something too complicated for words or too tiny for the naked eye to see, images have power. A lot of research has been done that we tend to understand images at 60 times faster than text, and that we can, as a species, might be able to recognize images in 13 milliseconds, which could actually be faster. Research done on this seems to be limited by the technology. So with these 2 things in mind, I like to talk about Cooked Illustrations, which is an initiative / company set up earlier this year whose goal is to discover how storytelling, illustration, and interactive media can be combined to communicate complex ideas more effectively. After all, and I'm paraphrasing from Julia Buntain, that we often have to explain the unseen, the abstract, and the fantastical. And I just realized I said that out of order. So these are some of the illustrations we've worked on in the last years on some articles produced by the O'Day Lab, let's say, orbit of scientists. And that's what we're trying to combine certain tools that we have at our disposal to make it more interesting. And here's some of the themes I spoke about early on. Let's get to that. Again, that quote of, in communicating science, we often work in making the unseen, the fantastic of what was and what could be visible. So to get to that, and this is where what I would like to actually share with you in my experience is how stories and visuals can co-create more effective to communicate research. And let's use the example of a recent collaborative project I had with Dr. Aaron O'Day, which is Martina and the Bridge of Time. So Martina is a young Panamanian girl who isn't sure who she is. She's Native American, she's Panamanian, from the countryside and from the city. She's voraciously curious about how the world works, but finds that people around her do not know what she wants to know. Thus, in our story, as she finds herself frustrated with the educational system's lack of answers, she builds a time machine, as one does, and goes back so she can inquire about the deep history of Panama. Furthers, now talk to me if you want to join the mailing list. So this whole book was a co-creation process where Aaron and I worked really closely to figure out specific things that I think might be useful for other people to know who are interested in just co-creating. So one of the first things that I like to focus on my work is that we need to focus on who our audience is. As I like to quote here, when you speak to everyone, nobody listens. So when any project you have that's about communication, you have to answer a very specific question. Who is the person that's going to read this, going to watch it? Is it everyone, or is it a young Panamanian girl aged 8 to 14. So the more specific you can be, it opens up possibilities, but at the same time, that could be a limitation to some people, but I see it as a way to get rid of noise. And I a good believer in what the composer Stravinsky said, that the more limits you have, the more you can be creative. Let's see. Whoop, there we go. But while Martina was fulfilling a very particular need in this particular context, and I'll speak more about later, early on, Aaron and I decided that the story should not be too constrained by age groups. We just said, we're going to be talking to kids, but not talk down at them. And we decided to start putting things in that will make the story timeless. So themes that over time, as the original audience grows up, they will start to, they can go back and see it again and again and again. So I put this example of themes in media that you only notice as you grow older. For example, the Shakespearean themes in the show Gargoyles, and my screen just disappeared, sorry. And themes of honor and gray moral areas in the 1990s Beast Wars cartoon. So I sort of lost the plot there, but it's about be laser focused on your audience, but also see the limitations as a way to be more creative within that box. Next point is, why are we doing this specific project? What is the need? So context is my goal. Where is the resulting cultural artifact going to exist? So allow me to put my business hat on and say, when we're working on a collaborative science communication project, is why we're doing it. Has somebody else made a thing like this already? Is there really a need? What niches are we fulfilling? So in the sample of Martin and the Bridge of Time, is that the particular context that we were working on in Panama is one where the education system is failing a lot of people. Panama's education system constantly lags behind in many of the international rankings. And there's a void in science communication and actually the deep understanding of deep history of the country. At the same time, Panama is host to the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute that, even though it's been in the country for about 100 years, if you ask people on the street, either they do not know it exists or they just think of it as that space that only rich people can actually talk to. So it is my belief that the book, once it comes out, is going to try to fulfill these two vacuums, which you can argue are slightly political, and thus becoming a unique cultural artifact that's both fulfilling a very specific educational need and perhaps become a product that could be sold, and from that maybe fund future research, or as our original goal set up, it's just to communicate the science through a story. So we move on to visual storytelling. So from that same book, The Science of Storytelling, which I really recommend, some of the basic cores of how to tell a story are characters, considering that humans really care about other people. Plot, which I like to think of it as the thing that opposes the characters or protagonists. Milieu, or the environment, the setting, when it happens, where it happens. And medium, the visual tool, in my case, as an illustrator, through which the story is told, be comics, movies, infographics, video games in other cases. And depending on, all of these are, let's say, a modular approach. There's our tools that you can use, and medium is an important one that I'll get to in a bit. But as we are co-creating, so it will be a researcher and an artist, or researcher and a videographer, the process of co-creating is a very, I will say, fidgety one in my experience. And I like to use co-creation versus collaboration, because Aaron and I really early on just said, like, we are writing and drawing at the same time. And in hindsight, I would recommend that anybody engaging in this process really set up goals or terms of reference early on. What are you accomplishing? What are the limits that you have, be budget, time, skills, and how are you collaborating, which mediums of communications you have, how often you're going to talk to one another, that sort of thing. So next is, as a designer and somebody who works commercially, I would say that iteration is a key to success, and by which I mean do as many sketches of an idea as possible, focus on it being rough, quick, something that's very low fidelity, because I often find that people who can get too enamored with one idea too early on and try to make it work. And what happens when you give it too much polish is that you're giving fidelity to an idea that might not be fully realized in a way. So I would recommend at every stage of your co-creation process, just do sketches, 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 sketches. And as you start to figure out that work doesn't work, you hone in on that key idea. As you can see on the lower right, that will be the finished page that started as a very rough, quick thing that I did in a couple minutes. And to sort of, as you can see this, the very first illustration we did for Martina on the upper left eventually turned into the one on the upper right. And finally, co-creation is a process that evolves over time and is very particular to the context, medium, and what you're trying to say and to whom. So it's a, as I say, just look at what you're doing and try to figure out that process. And what you might decide early on those terms of reference and goals might not work out, and you might have to change them over time. So to go back to that idea of telling visual stories that teach science or teaching science with visual stories, my examples in the beginning of the classic edutainment, picture books and toys is what I would say is telling visual stories, is teaching science with visual stories and telling visual stories. And I'm not gonna actually answer it, now that I sort of lost the plot on that one, but I like to see the difference that if you communicate with people at an emotional level through stories, they might have what is called incidental learning. They're not even realizing that they're picking up these scientific terms or the research in the story, versus the traditional way of telling visual stories that teach science can be very much, oh, that was cool, great, moving on. And yep, that's it for me.
Thank you, Ian, very much. That was great. Perfect timing too. So if anybody has any questions for Ian, I believe that we can ask them in the question and answers box, or if you would like to raise your hand. At the moment, there are no questions, I understand. Is that correct?
Yeah, we have questions in terms of the presentation and recording. So the meeting is being recorded, yes, and will be made available afterwards through like the Twitter, IBS, Humboldt Day links or email. I'm not sure how Karen organizes that, but everything is going to be available. There was also a question if the presentations are going to be shared. We didn't discuss that. That will depend a little bit on the speakers, but if yes, then we will see how to share them either also by Twitter or in any kind of way. But yeah, thanks for the interest in that sense. At this moment, we don't have direct questions for Ian, but if anything arises in the meantime or at the end when we're ready, then you're free to reach out to him again. Okay, so we have a question. It says, Ian, really nice work. I wanted to know if your illustrations are just published in your webpage, or is there a printed version of them?
If you mean Martina specifically, the book is being printed. We have a limited run that's going to be, I hope, come out very soon, distributed to Panama. We are working on, we're still figuring out how to make it available for everyone. We'll make that public. If you could send an email to me at cookedillustrations@gmail.com, I could probably help you with that. My other work is also at cookedillustrations.com.
And there is a question that was from Amelia. I'm gonna press a button allowing her to talk.
Good, great.
Hi, I'm wondering if I can speak in Spanish.
Yes.
Okay. Mi pregunta era más, por ejemplo, tú llegas con esta información a la gente y es una forma súper viable porque creo que en este contexto los científicos buscan una manera de hacer el conocimiento alcanzable a los demás, pero no te has encontrado con esta limitación que a veces cuando uno quiere citar o quiere aprender no tiene tanta confiabilidad porque dicen como, oh, aprendí esto en un cómic y entonces se queda esa barrera limitante porque no tiene tanta confiabilidad como decir, oh, lo leí en tal paper, sino lo aprendí en una historia. ¿Has sentido esa limitante?
So shall I answer in English so everyone can understand, or? En realidad no lo he encontrado personalmente, pero sí, es algo que va a suceder. O sea, déjame reconfigurar. El mejor ejemplo que te puedo dar es cuando Wikipedia empezó a ser usado como un recurso, cuando yo estaba en la escuela, no era aceptado como un recurso, era nuevo, no sabemos cómo funciona. Pero la idea de si el cómic o el producto final está basado en ciencia verífica o verificada, puede ser un buen recurso. El detalle es que es una relación cultural que tenemos con los procesos mediáticos. Es válido que hayas aprendido, pero cómo el mundo acepta ese proceso de aprendizaje, yo creo que habla más sobre una conversación que se tiene que tener sobre cómo aprendemos y qué métodos usamos.
Thank you, Emilia, for your question, and thanks, Ian, for answering that. We have another question from Pedro. It's about looking for advice for a young Latino American scientist that loves to teach and spread science, but don't have any funds to do it. I think that that's a question that perhaps several people on the panelists will be able to answer and discuss. So we should leave that one perhaps for the end, if that's okay, and move on to the next panelist, so we can keep things moving along. Thank you very much, Amelia, for your question. Thanks, Pedro, for your question as well, which we'll get to later. Okay, thanks, Ian. So our next speaker, our next presenter is Julia Heinen. Julia is a PhD student at the Center for Macroecology, Evolution and Climate at the University of Copenhagen, in Denmark, obviously. And she has worked on tropical islands. Particularly, she's worked in Mauritius, where, of course, the now extinct Dodo resided. And she's, through her years of being a researcher, she's collected a really amazing set of videos about her expeditions. And hopefully in today's talk, she will be highlighting some of the key components of making such engaging fieldwork videos and the usefulness of those videos for scientific outreach. So Julia, thank you very much for your time. I hope that you'll be able to share your screen and go ahead, please.
Hello, thank you for inviting me. And I'm going to share my screen to, okay. Yeah, so I'm going to talk about videos I made during my fieldwork. I'm a PhD student at the Center for Macroecology, Evolution and Climate, and I study island macroecology. So I'm investigating the consequences of human-driven extinctions on islands, in island communities of birds, mammals, and reptiles. And for this, I collect data and do some field work on tropical islands. And this is really a lot of fun. And during that time, I wanted to document some of the things I was doing and share that. So, but actually I started out with having a bit of a fear of speaking in front of cameras, and I think a lot of people have the same thing, and so I was a bit reluctant to actually put myself in front of the camera and talk. But then I realized that there are quite a lot of benefits to sharing your work and showing other people the Mauritian forest and some endangered animals and those kinds of things. So I started off with something a bit more simple, with a recorded conference talk. I just pointed the camera at the screen, and that was it. And I put that on YouTube, and that was quite an easy start. And then I got invited to make a video abstract of the paper that I published, because I realized that you spend so much time as a scientist writing your papers, and then once it's done, yeah, it's easy to just be done with it and forget about it. But actually the work then really starts, because you want people to read all that work and you want to share that. So it's worth putting some effort into communicating it and spreading it around. And then there was another thing, that I was involved in a paper that got a bit misinterpreted by the media. And I realized I actually wanted to explain this properly in my own words, so that this miscommunication got resolved, or at least attempted to do that. And then I started to make some very simple videos of me in the field, explaining what I was doing, actually showing fruits in the forest, and showing why they were interesting. And I started to really enjoy that, and I got a bit over my fear of speaking in front of cameras. And then I started to use drone footage included in that, and that was lots of fun. Started to interview very interesting people that I met for the IBS, and also just in fieldwork. So why should you care about videos? I've already explained it a bit, but now it's really important that you, or it's a really good way to actually reach a lot of people across the world. You can connect to different people that would normally not come to conferences. You can connect with people outside of the scientific community, like managers and conservation people, citizen scientists, other people that are interesting. And it allows you to connect with the viewer about your research or what you're passionate about in a much more personal level. And you can become a bit known for the type of research that you do, so that people will remember you and will think about you when they want to cite a paper or collaborate with someone or hire someone or invite someone. And that really helps a lot with your career, and even it can be used for proposing for proposals that can get funded. Increase engagement with people that you want to motivate to participate in something. And you can easily break down and explain very complicated things. So if you want to do this yourself, you should start with planning the kind of video that you want to make. And for that, you should consider things like the purpose, the goal of your video, the type of audience that you have, the main message that you want to convey. It should be one or two key messages and not too much. Whether you want to be talking yourself, or if it's easier if someone else interviews you and you just answer the questions, that can be a good way to start if it's a bit scary. You can just do a voiceover of your PowerPoint slides, or actually showing your face, and that can be a bit more personal. You can try to tell a story from beginning to end, like I'm trying to do sometimes, the beginning of field work, and then the continuation, and then the ending. Take people on the journey with you. Think about the objects and locations you want to show, but also put yourself in the shoes of the other person, the person that would look at the video and think about what they would like to see and what they would expect. And then when you're recording, you actually don't really need all the fancy, expensive equipment. You can just use very simple simple equipment like the camera on your phone or your webcam or something like that. But the only thing that I do recommend is that you think about the audio quality, because that can really prevent your message from coming across if it's really bad quality. So you could think about getting a clip-on microphone or something like that. Oh yeah, and if you're using your phone, use it horizontally instead of vertically. That's very useful. But it should be short, because people's attention span is really short, and try to keep it a bit fast-paced so that people aren't easily bored. Make it maybe 1-2 minutes, something like that. Yeah, limit the amount of information. Film in a quiet area and not in front of a window or wall, because that would turn you into a silhouette that people can't really see you. The wall, yeah, it's just a bit boring sometimes as a background. If you want to add text at the bottom or the top, think about that when you're filming initially. And don't try to move the camera too much. It can be a bit difficult and a bit busy to make that look nice. Then when you're finally editing it, there are many free programs online and online tutorials that are very useful, such as iMovie, Lightworks, Filmora. Yeah, I really actually learned how to do this by looking at other YouTube videos that explain and talk you through it. So there are some very simple ones. Yeah, again, keep it short. Check for the volume, add some subtitles, because when you're sharing it on social media, a lot of people don't actually switch on the sound. They just scroll through their Facebook page and then the video starts running because they're sitting in a bus or something. So it's useful to keep to get subtitles. I think it's all about good communication. And that takes some practice. I myself don't do it perfectly either, but it's things to consider in that are, for example, what you want to tell people as a scientist versus what the other people that are looking at your video actually want to know. They often want to know how things relate to them, what it means for them personally, and scientists often just want to show the results or something like that. Also, when we're writing scientific papers, we tend to sort of build up to the final conclusion and the most important point at the end. But in videos, you want to start off with the most important results, the most important things first, because people don't really have that much attention, and they just want to be grabbed at first. In the first minute or so. Yeah, limit the amount of messages that you want to give. A good way to do that is to just say the sentence, I want to tell you that, for example, the dodo went extinct on Mauritius. And also explain to people why it's interesting to them by, for example, saying, I want to tell you this because learning about past extinctions can help us prevent extinctions in the future. Something like that. Short answers are best. It's very often that it's very hard to edit very long sentences, and the communication just gets a bit more difficult. If you want to show your figures, try to simplify them. A simplified version is sometimes necessary, or just don't use the figures. But I think it's so important to share your enthusiasm, make it come across how enthusiastic you are about something, how passionate you are, and then that real emotion really helps people connect. In the future, I would like to make a little documentary about island extinctions, and especially the people that I met in all these fieldwork situations. They really inspire me, and I want to share their story. For example, the real experiences of people actually seeing the last bird on Hawaii, or the people actually fighting to save the remaining species. I would love to turn that into a story and share that. And for people that are a bit hesitant to start making their own videos, just go for it. Just give it a try and start with something simple. It's you don't need to make it very complicated or impressive at first. So I would like to show you an example of what I had as a video. This is my website, and I have a few videos here, but the last one is about a new Dodo excavation site on Mauritius. It was very exciting, and I filmed with a drone, and I made lots of shots. And but there's probably a lot of things that I could improve, and I would like to show this to give you an idea of what you can do with it, and what things work and what things might not work. So think about it as a bit of an exercise to see how these things could work. I'm gonna try to also share this sound. Okay, just let me know if it doesn't work.
It's good.
Hello, I'm Julia Heinen, and I'm from the University of Copenhagen. I'm standing here on a record of what the environment in Mauritius used to look like 12,000 years ago. What we're finding is that the environment used to look very different. It used to be covered in pandanus trees and other large trees like the tamalacoque, the dodo tree, and it was actually a wet forest. But now it's a dry sort of swamp area with sugarcane. It was very different. So it used to be covered in giant tortoises. They were roaming around here, quite numerous, and we're finding all these animals that are now extinct today. Among them are the dodo and giant skinks and other animals. And we're trying to work out what Mauritius used to look like before the first humans arrived.
Hi, I'm Julian Hume, and I'm here as a paleontologist working on this incredible fossil site. We know it's 12,000 years old, and we're excavating down to try and find bones, and also trying to find the plant remains so we can identify the forest that was once here 12,000 years ago. At this stage, we've got lots of people excavating, bringing up sediment, we're sieving everything, and we're finding some wonderful things. Let's see what happens next.
Here.
This pit here has proved to be the best one of all. It's incredibly rich in fossil bones, and if we look down here, all these are bones in situ. In other words, they're in the place where they died, where the animal died. So this is very important, and we're looking on the top of them to see how they're laying out. And once we know the animals, we then can work out the deposition environment. How did those bones get there? Well, they are embedded in this very light-coloured limey layer, and that was very important for the preservation of the bones. And if you look just over here, this dark organic clay is devoid of bones. So there was some event that happened to bring these bones in once this first layer had been laid down, and that's what we're trying to work out at the moment.
Okay. Yeah, that was it. Thank you. Yeah, I hope to also see some more videos from other researchers at some point. That would be very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Julia. That was wonderful and really inspirational, really, how you managed to be a world-class researcher and do all of your own outreach yourself. It's incredible and inspirational for people that come from institutions that might not necessarily have those resources like an outreach department and so on. So thank you so much. But there's a couple of questions for you that have come in on the chat. The first one comes from Titi Sabdini, and they say, the question is, what is the duration of the movie or video that you've mostly done? And what about making animation from multiple images? Perhaps you have experience with that.
Well, I haven't done any animation yet, but that would be really cool. I think I'm still learning a lot and developing my skills with the videos. And I think that could be very useful as well and interesting. The duration of the videos, yeah. In the beginning, I made videos that were 10 minutes long, and it turned out to be way too long. And I realized that 3 minutes or 2 minutes actually is much more efficient, because even though you can put less into it, people will actually finish the movie rather than just stop watching after 1 minute and then think, oh, it's still another 10 minutes of this slow someone talking. Or yeah, so short is better.
Thank you, and thank you for your question. The next question comes from Marcos Dantes Queiroz, who says, first of all, nice presentation, which is great. Do you have any tips for free sources of images, sounds, video clips, etc., to incorporate them in videos? Perhaps that's something that you could direct people to on a website or something?
Well, I know there's quite a few websites out there that have little bits of video that you can just use without copyright. I actually used that for some IBS videos of Amsterdam. But I don't remember exactly which websites they were, but I think it just takes a bit of Googling and make sure the copyright things are in order, because otherwise you get in trouble.
Great point. Thank you. Thank you, Julia. And there's one more question for you, if we have time. Which of your videos have reached the most people, and do you know why? Like, what is the key ingredient? What have you learned from which ones are popular and which ones aren't? It's a great question. That's from Richard Field, by the way.
Ah, thank you. Well, I don't remember how many views I have for each video, but I think I noticed that if I share it a lot on social media, then my views increase a lot. And so you kind of control it a bit yourself as well. And I guess when I look back at the videos I made in the beginning, they were a bit, yeah, I looked a bit scared, and maybe it wasn't so personal. And I think later in the videos you see my enthusiasm and sort of my real self a bit more. And I think that helps people to, yeah, want to watch the video, I think. So that may help. I don't know. Thanks.
Thank you for that great question as well. We have a couple of questions that are more broader questions from Catalina Gonzalez and from Maria Torres, which we'll get to at the end of the session. If it's okay now, I think we should move on to the next panelist, who will be Beatriz Diaz Paoli, and she is a researcher from Bergen University in Norway, a colleague of Suzette, I understand. And she studies the anthropogenic causes of contemporary evolution, unnatural evolution, the opposite of natural evolution as described by Darwin, essentially what we're doing to animals and how we're affecting their evolution. And she wrote an incredible piece, an incredible paper. I thought it was incredible, for this new journal called Frontiers for Young Minds. And it was really impressive, and it's wonderful to have you here, Beatriz. And so I'll leave it up to you to share your screen. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks. So I hope everybody can see my screen, and I'm here to talk about my article in Frontiers of Young Minds. And so first, this is the article. It was called Fishing Can Turn Big Fish into Small Fish, and it was authored by me, our PhD student Vitalia, and my supervisor Mikko. And I will start talking first that, as Aaron said, I'm a postdoc at the University of Bergen, and I study the impact of human activities on the evolution and ecology, and in particular fisheries-induced evolution. And the reason why I write this paper is because we promised the Norwegian Research Council that we will do science outreach, but in a way we never really know what to do. So we wrote many things, like we wrote that we would use Twitter, but in a way we know that that's not really a broad audience, and it's not really this science outreach, because at the end we are only followed by other researchers like us. I also tried making videos. I took a course about video making, but I didn't get too far, so I think I'm not creative enough to do it. And I thought that the paper is just easier and it's just closer to what we know as researchers. And I had some experience writing a popular science paper. I did it in 2010, and it was in a small magazine, a Norwegian magazine called Naturen. And this was a very good experience. It gave me 1 credit for my PhD in science outreach. And here we joke about that getting a paper in Naturen is almost like getting it in nature, that it's only 1 little N that is making the difference. But it was written in Norwegian, and I needed some colleagues to help me with the Norwegian. And I never felt what the audience it reached. I didn't know about it. It got published. I have a book, but I don't know anything of who read it and who didn't read it and so on. And also, I was not sure if I would just get another one published there, because at the time I knew the professor who was the editor, and I always thought that he picked it because he knew me. So I learned about Frontiers for Your Minds at a conference, and what I like about it was that it was the same system of publishing regular papers. It was easy, it was in English, and it really attracted me that it was for kids, but also that it was reviewed by kids. And of course, it's also very cute. Like it has a very nice cartoons that they add with each paper. And they have many subject areas that you can write, from astronomy, biodiversity, mathematics, health, a lot of things. And there's 2 types of articles. There's the core concept, which is what I wrote, that you just define 1 concept in biology, like evolution or biodiversity and things like that. Or there's this new discovery, where you just translate an already published paper that you have, like a very specific study for kids. It's just a kind of like a translation for kids' language. And the manuscripts are quite short. It's just 1,500 words, and you're only allowed to have a maximum of 5 references and 3 figures. You also need to add a glossary of different terms, and you have the author biography. And then you need to pick what's the intended readers, whether it's from 8 to 11 years old or from 12 to 15. And I chose 12 for 15. And in the review process, of course, like in every paper, you have 2 phases. One is the editor, and the other one is the reviewers, which in this case are kids. And the editor is mostly focusing on the readability of the paper and whether it would reach a general audience, and if it's really understandable for the kids of that age range, which in my case was from 8th to 9th grade. So then what they point you is you need to make sure that all your text with this software, it fits those scores that they want you to do. And then I got familiar with something called the RIC score, that it should be from 3 to 4 if it's from 9th and 8th graders, and then of course if it's above 10, 7, 10, it's really college level. And then the software also points at you which things you could change to make the text easier. Do you use too much passive voice? Do you use too many adverbs? And also they tell you if you use a cliche, which in my case was quite funny because they were telling me that I should not use fish in water, which is a cliche, but my paper was literally about fish in the water. So that was a bit difficult to kind of fix. And they also highlight hard words, and sometimes it's a bit counterintuitive because I would, as a scientist, I wouldn't use traits like an individual trait from an animal, and but I thought that was too technical, so I used characteristic, and then the software told me that was a hard word that I actually should go back to trait. And that's something linked to this other part, that words that are too long or paragraphs that have too many words in the makes it more difficult. So my first version, the first version that it was submitted, it had a score of readability C to D, which is not very good. It was 70% reachability, and it had this reach score of over 10 on average. After I changed the text according to the software, I got much better. I got an A, and I have 100 reachability. And of course, I also managed to make my text understandable for the year class that I was aiming. But I have to confess that the final version, the version that is published, actually has a much higher reach score, which is kind of college level. But to this, I blame the editor and the production fault, because they also tell you, okay, maybe I should, you should change this sentence and put it this way and so on. So in a way, it's also their experience, and they guide you. And then at the end, you should not focus so much about this software because it doesn't always do the correct thing. And but what is most important is the young reviewers, and what they need to do is read the paper, and then they need to answer these questions, and these are aimed for making sure that they understood the paper and that you manage to make your message across. And of course so the question is, they need to explain what's about, what do they think is important, what's interesting, and so on. And I was very surprised about their answers, because they were really good at knowing why is this important, and they immediately said this is important for ecosystem impact, and they even used the term ecosystem functioning, which I did not even dare to put it in the paper, thinking that it was too complicated. And they also picked that the most interesting part was what I thought it was the most difficult part, but it was also the part that they were maybe not that familiar. They pointed out at maybe I should not use the word thus, that it was afraid they didn't know what it meant. And then they have like these open questions to the author, and in there they were really show that they were very interested to what my work was. Exactly, they were asking questions like, what did exactly I do? What was my experiment? What I'm going to do next? And they were really interested in the science. And then, of course, you don't only need to answer these questions to the reviewers, you actually need to change the text and include their recommendation. And the reviewers, they have a mentor that supervises them. And then the final version, when you have done all the changes, they are the ones who decide whether they endorse the manuscript, and then it will be accepted by the editor. But the first step is that the reviewers and the mentor had to endorse the manuscript. And then also during the production process, you get this cute illustration to cover your manuscript, which is quite nice. And once it was published, then I learned who my reviewers were, who was also really nice. And then there were these two girls, Megan and Poppy, and you get the small bio. And it was not just nice to know that there were two girls that they were interested in marine biology, but oh yeah, and then also the journal also tweets about it and tweets with a message from the reviewer. So they are always the center. These young reviewers is the center of the whole journal and the paper. And as I was saying, was that it was really nice to find out that these reviewers were somebody who were really interested in the marine environment and in the conservation. They have a group called Ullapool Sea Savers that they just want to raise awareness about conservation. And so I felt that with this paper, I could see who I reached and what was the audience that is more general, and also that it, at least for the reviewers, it went to somebody that maybe could use the information and take benefit of it. So it was much better than the first paper I wrote. And so in general, I just want to say that it was a wonderful experience and I will repeat it, and thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Beatriz. That was amazing. I got to say, I was so impressed with your paper. Such a complex idea to get across to young minds, and you did it beautifully. The idea that we have unnatural selection against wild animals is something that I worked on myself, but is kind of difficult to get across. And I think maybe it won't even just be for young minds, it could even be for people that are coming into the field that don't know about the field so well. So I think it's really wonderful. If there are any questions for Beatriz, please go ahead and raise your hand, or use the question and answers button at the bottom. I don't think anything's come in just yet. Is that correct, Suzette? But I do have a question. Actually, I'm kind of interested in the journal and whether it is, whether you pay for it, and wondering how much you ended up paying, if you did, to publish that article.
No, it's not, I didn't pay anything. It's just free.
Okay, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I think that it's really nice that they are looking like for mentors, that they would supervise these reviewers, and then they have also they have a page that they try to use to encourage teachers and parents to use the paper to teach science to their kids. And so I think it's a really nice setup, and I think more people should contribute to it. I think it's yeah, and also for adults, it's nice to learn about astronomy and, you know, maths and so on, that I would read, that I would not understand a real math paper, but it's really interesting to just read the one for kids.
A few questions have come in, and I think I probably missed them, so excuse me about that. So the first question from Damaris is, nice presentation. Do you have any marketing strategy, or how do you invite the child audience to read that type of papers? Like, how do you disseminate the paper? Or do you leave that up to the journal?
Well, I have shared it with some of my friends on Twitter and so on, but I think that the good thing is that the journal has this framework, and they are using it, right? Like they already encourage school and so on. And what I was thinking is to maybe try to engage some schools here, not just to read the papers, but maybe to become mentors and use their school kids, right? If like a teacher of science would just spend 1 hour with their students to read a paper and review it, and then they would learn, yeah, from a specific topic, and it's a good experience. So I think it's more to encourage schools or parents that they have kids that they maybe should do it. Yeah.
Thank you. Catalina Gonzalez asks, do you have a similar platform in Spanish? Do you know of a platform?
This I don't know about.
In Spanish, similar approaches?
No, I don't know about it, yeah.
And then another question from Marcos Dantos Queiroz is, perhaps I missed this part, but can anyone send papers to the Frontiers for Young Minds journal or is it
Yes.
only by invitation?
No, everybody. I didn't have any. That was the beauty of it, that it's just open for everybody, and you just submit, and I guess the editor also checks that the science is correct. Like, for instance, they say this new discovery, you need to cite the real paper, right? That it needs to be published and it needs to be already, yeah, it's already a established thing. And then I think that if it's a core concept, they would check that you actually work on that field and that you know, yeah. So this is a bit, the editor kind of checks this first before, and then would send it to the reviewers. But everybody is open for everybody, it's free, it's open access, yeah.
That's great. And a question from Natalia Gondora in Spanish, and she says, tengo una pregunta para Beatriz. ¿Conoce algunas aplicaciones para mejorar la legibilidad? ¿Recomienda para escribir en español o hablar en español? Sorry.
En español no lo sé, porque en la página web que me dio el editor era en inglés, pero supongo que existe. Habrá que simplemente googlearlo y encontrarlo.
Gracias. Y gracias por la pregunta. The last question that's come in, I believe, is from Maria Torres, and she asks, is that the only journal for kids that you know, or are there others?
Well, this is the only one I know that is really into this science, with the science format, right? I mean, the Frontiers is a very good scientific journal with different topics, right? So, and I'm sure there's other kids magazines, but I don't know how easy it is to publish them. I think that it's the same as Nature. Maybe if you know the editor, you can get a paper accepted, but this was open for everybody.
Thank you, Beatriz. Okay, with that, I think we should move on to the next panelist. Thank you very much, Beatriz. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Our next panelist is Catalina Giraldo, and it's a great pleasure to have Catalina join us. Catalina is an environmental visual artist who actually is also a biologist, a trained biologist herself as well, which is really great. She will discuss in this presentation the process of making a short film using 3D animation, photography, and video. And she's going to showcase a film which I thought was wonderful because it doesn't bow to the assumption that everything has to be in bite sizes. This is a fairly decent length video which really deals with a complex issue with a good attention, and I think it succeeds very well. So thank you, Catalina, for joining us. It's great to have you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Aaron and Suzette, for this invitation. I'm so happy to be here sharing how we made sky islands that I'm traveling down these mountains. This is a collaboration. This is scientifically supported by Dr. Suzette Flantua, who is here, Dr. Henry Hohimstra, two voices, one in Spanish, one in English, Tanya O'Sullivan in English, and Carla Toledano in Spanish. The original music is from Juan José Salazar, and it was funded by Hugo de Vries Funds and Nutic. I'll tell you how was the process of making this short film. It was basically based on this paper, the flickering connectivity system of the North Andean Paramos. So the plan of us was translate or transform this paper, scientific paper, into animation. First started as a visualization and it finished as a movie, as a short movie. So as Aaron said, I am a biologist too. I worked for many years with Henry. I work in the Lake Fukene project in Colombia as paleoecologist, palynologist, as an analyst. So, and then I moved like in 2010, 2011 into the arts. And in 2016, I was doing a master's degree in Rotterdam University. So we found this like a really nice moment to create a collaboration. So we started collaboration with Suzette and Henry. We have meetings like once a month, sometimes at school, sometimes by online, because Suzette was outside of Netherlands. This is our first script, I will say, or storytelling. So we started with boxes, figuring out how will be the visualization, how many seconds we take every part. Then we moved to these kind of sketches, are my own sketches. I'm not a painter, but basically it helps me a lot to go for a storytelling. This is my mess. This is my understanding, reading the papers and figuring out how to make the storyline. And then sometimes outdoors in the Netherlands, it's really nice to go if we have a little bit of sun. And this is how it finished. We finally have had like a voiceover, someone who is telling the story, and then we can create the movie. So I used softwares for animation, photography, and film. Basically for animation, I use Cinema 4D. After Effects and Premiere are more for film and special effects, and Photoshop and Lightroom for photography. So the first step in terms of visualization is creating a sort of style. So I was exploring, learning how to use the software, exploring how to create landscapes, playing a little bit with color, and finally we get this final style that we decided that is really nice. This is more examples. This is my neighbor's roster. And finally, we get this style for the movie. Same with the biodiversity map. Suzette was helping me to create the map, so I was figuring out how to put that in a topography map. This is to show you that everything has to be painted. So for example, there is a part where it's about the phylogenetic tree. So I had to paint it, each of the clades. We decided to use Speletia for this, and to finally get this image that maybe will be 10 or 20 seconds. So it's a lot of work behind to create a final image. This is to show the first idea I had with the Sky Islands as a title, but at the end of the movie, I create a new one. So I get to this one and this one. This is how it looks, the software. So once you have the scene, you create cameras, light, and basically action. And in the action, you will have these kind of files. It's like a photos, like a frames. It depends on how many seconds are you creating. So you will have 1,000 or hundreds of pictures. And then with the software, you will have the film, the movie, the video. And I use also these After Effects because I use also photography. So I didn't want the plain, the flat photography. So I use After Effects to create a little bit of effect sometimes in the photos for the first version. And at the end, you have this kind of, each one of these is a video. And then here in Premiere, that is for film, you create the movie. You can put sound, you can put sounds and voice, music, and get the final render. And for music and voiceover, for the first version, I used like available music in YouTube. And when I upload it to YouTube, I have to share the credit. I have to put the credit of the music. And for voiceover, I was trying many different voices at school first, and then Suzette was happy. One of those voices. She came with Henry, and we had a really fun day in the studio at the school in Rotterdam. And here is Henry playing a bit with the software recording. And how I was doing a master in arts, to make a thesis project, a manuscript. So this manuscript is about what is the Andes, what is the origin of the Andes, what is going on with the global warming, climate change, Anthropocene, the collaboration between science and arts. So basically it's 4 chapters. This is the portrait. And we had the opportunity 1 year before, in 2017, when I was starting with the project, to participate in Open Day in Science Park, where all doors are open, people come, families and kids, and I created this installation. I like to do a lot, making video installation, video art installation, and in this opportunity, we had microscopes, and we have 2 big wall screens with pictures, and the first try of a flickering connectivity system was showing how the Andes are. It looks like this first, very colorful, and also, I'll say, psychedelic. Some friends said to me that this is a little bit psychedelic. Okay, so here, which is a little bit more. It is available in YouTube. So this is a big wall with 2 projectors. And Serinke, she was master student at that time. She was helping me with kids and family to explain them what is about the installation. So we were explaining people how palynologists work, how the flowers has pollen, and how we take out these from sediments, and then we can have data and create a theory about how the climate changed in the past. Here are kids playing with the installation, basically with the video, and it was really fun for them. Okay. So in 2018, I had a graduation show. So we have basically 2 venues in Rotterdam. One was Kino Theater, and I don't know if it's sounding, but it doesn't matter. So this is like it looks in the theater. I also had another venue that was in the academy. So we have an open day for all the students that are graduating. Could be bachelor, could be masters. So I created a video art installation here with the same movie. And I created this like 180 degrees screen, like experimental one, because I like so much this idea of immersive experiences. So this is like an experiment to create this in a small room. And this is like it looks at the end. So basically it's the same movie, but in this like sort of rounded screen. And we have here a sofa, and yeah, you can see that it's very, very small room. This is a very special projector for small spaces. And also we have the first version in YouTube. We have already over 4,000 views, which is very nice. But I then come back to Colombia, and I realized that it was very important to have it in Spanish voice, to get local people to share with countryside people or high school, because how the information is, it's very, very, I mean, it's coming from a paper, scientific paper. So it's easier if you listen in Spanish and see the movie, but if you have to read and see and watch, it's too much. So we created a second version for a festival version, actually. This version has original music, Spanish voice, and also I get new footage in the Paramos. So I used basically photography, like time-lapse photography for video, also. And so here I am in La Cocha, doing my job, taking pictures, close to the Cucuy. And this is a friend of mine who is a photographer, so he was giving me some tips as well. This is how I have to edit later, picture by picture. It's pretty similar to making animation, the time-lapse photography. I'm here working with the musician, so we are basically like synchronizing the music he created with the audio, the voice, and the final video. And we applied, or I have been applying this year for film festival. It's so great to find there are about 121 environmental and science film festivals. There are some platforms you can find Film Freeway and Fest Home. And I found between these 121, around 51 where the short could be submitted. And happily, we will have a premiere in Colombia next Thursday, this Thursday. You can get online in Festival if you are in Colombia. If you are not, you can use VPN, I think. And you can enjoy not only Islas del Cielo, that is here in Spanish, but there are a lot of movies, really nice movies about environment. We are already accepted as well in English version by Get Institute. This is the Science Film Festival. And this is really nice. They decided that we have 3 sustainable development goals for United Nations. And it will be screened in Angola, Brazil, Burkina Faso, Ethiopia, Kenya, Malaysia, Namibia, Philippines, Rwanda, and South Africa from October to December this year. And also we are accepted next year for the Ecuador. It's supposed to be this year, but with the pandemic, they decide to move that to next year. So I don't know exactly when it will be. I think it will be in March, but it is already there. And that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Catalina. That was so impressive. The scope and the reach of your work is beyond compare. Really, congratulations on this work. It's terrific. Can I ask? I've got to say, hearing that cockerel in the background really makes me miss being in Central America. And I think Ian Cook will say the same thing. It's wonderful to hear. Can you please do a video about the cockerel? It's really famous.
Of course.
Now.
Just talk about it. Awesome.
So if you have any questions for Catalina, please raise your hand or write them in the chat and we can pass them on to Catalina. I just also want to say, while we're waiting for any questions to come in, that there are several questions, really good questions coming in from the team that are posed to all of the panelists, which we'll ask all of the panelists at the end in a discussion. So please, please know that your questions have been received and we are keeping them for the end. So stick around for that discussion at the end. Thank you. Are there any questions specifically for Catalina? Let's see.
Everything is clear.
So Catalina, I'm sure people see the advanced software that you've been using. Maybe you can say something about the total time that it actually took to make like the 13-minute video and animation.
A year, but working very hard. 20 hours a day, maybe working, learning to use the software first. Having a lot of help from art school to figuring out how to make everything. And then for render process, that is a lot. I used about 7 computers for a month, all day and night rendering, especially the landscape scenes, because sometimes it take, I think it took like yeah, like 1 or 2 weeks just rendering. I mean the computers. I was doing more things.
Maybe you can explain what rendering is.
Yeah, and back to the share screen. Oh, I think I closed the, no, here. Render is having these frames, basically. So for each scene that camera is doing, like traveling, like in a flight, over the Andes or behind the Andes, or you know, like all the scenes that you could see in the movie. I did 2 minutes, I think. I didn't use all the 2 minutes for each one, but 2 minutes will be maybe 3 weeks of render. And render means that the machine is creating frame by frame. And then I have to process that. No, this is just like photos. You have 1,000 of photos, and then 3,500 photos, and then I put it in another software. I use this one, that is After Effects, and this software helped me to create a movie coming from the software.
Yeah.
So that's right.
That's yeah, that's really very insightful. So we have a question from Wallace. Fascinating talk. Thank you so much. I was wondering how you decided to get into making these animations and how you balance your interest as a scientist with your interest as an artist or science communicator.
Well, I started as a biologist. I worked for about 10 years in palynology as a paleoecologist. I also worked with pollen from honey and bees. But at the time, it was like 2005, 2006, 2007. I was passionate by photography and film as well, like a hobby. But at some point, I was just tired of science, and I feel that I need to move into the arts. And one of the reasons I did it is because I've working with people in the fields. I felt that we never come back with the results to local people, and it's like it's really bad for us, like as a scientist. And I consider that is super important, because we are going to the field, we are taking data, we are like in our minds, and then going to the lab, having our data, making publications, but never come back to show the people the results. And I also work for conservation, so I feel that it's so important to transform our information into something that is visual and is easy to digest, and people right now need to understand why global warming is so important, why climate change is happening, what's going on with biodiversity, why we have to protect what we have. And I think scientists has this message, but we have to collaborate with artists to create this message, because in science you are very a little bit closed, and in arts you have to be open. I feel that studying first, I studied first in California for 3 years. I did first a master in fine arts in digital arts and media. And the first year I was like, yeah, I'm really close. It's like I was studying with artists. Artists are in another dimensions. And I feel I'm not, but I feel, I feel really tight studying with artists, pure artists. So I think for this integration, in my own case, and how I combine both is because I can't think about other thing that is not the earth, and because this is my background, this is my unconscious. I'm thinking all the time on that. So as an artist, I put all this unconscious scientific mind playing with the arts outside. So how is the process? I don't know. I'm figuring out still.
That's great, Catalina, and you touched upon a couple of things that I'm sure that we were going to come back on in the discussion. Also appeared in the questions, so that's very good. And I saw Carlos kind of like, yeah, I agree, yeah. So I think it's a good moment to give the word to Carlos, and looking forward to that as well. So thank you, Catalina.
Thanks.
Well, can you hear me, guys? Thank you very much. First, I want to thank, I can't believe I am talking with this amazing group of people. I cannot believe it. Catalina, I have to say, my students love, I teach biogeography. My students love that video. Every time I show it in class, they are like, oh my God. So congratulations. I'm going to share my screen and tell you about our project called Ciencia Café para su merced. Can you guys see the screen?
Yeah, all good.
All right. So Ciencia Café para su merced. First of all, my name is Carlos Guarnizo. I am a biologist. I am interested in why landscape, specifically mountains, promote biodiversity. Since Humboldt Day, I like mountains like Humboldt as well. And speaking of storytelling, I'm going to give you a little story that how we ended up doing this initiative. It's an independent initiative called Ciencia Café para su merced, which means like science coffee for you. Su merced is like a word to say more or less you in the central region of Colombia. So if we go 3 years ago, we were doing this with my sister, who is a designer. As Catalina was saying, it's very important for us to try to work together also with artists, with designers. Fortunately, my sister, she's a designer, and we were trying to figure out the name of our mascot, which is Sumersaurio, which is right behind me. And because we had this idea of starting a science communication initiative. So those were the early versions. Somebody asked before, how can you do science communication in Latin America without money? Well, this is an example. We don't have any money. This is us. This is my wife, Kate. We are doing our green screen with this. As you see, it's everything is made at home. So how we started? Well, and also how we ended up also in national TV here in Colombia in a public channel. This is going to be the story of that. So 3 years ago, a group of biologists and non-scientists, we start talking about, hey, some of us, we are publishing papers for a while. We see a lot of colleagues publishing papers, but we don't see those papers having an impact on society. They are, we are communicating mostly through a medium that is not a channel that is not reaching the public. We're going to conferences, and those are for the same people who read the papers. So we decided to start this initiative. None of us have any experience doing scientific communication, so it was like an adventure. It was not easy at the beginning, but right now we are like, wow, fortunately we did that. It was the best decision to start this initiative. So we are Kate May, she's not a scientist, Sandra Galeano, she's a biologist, Carolina Guarnizo, she's my sister, she's a designer, Vicky Flechas, she's a biologist, Andrew as well, Andrew Crawford, Nicolas Urbina as well, and Natalia Gutierrez. So we're the team of Ciencia Café para su merced. So first of all, we say, okay, how can we do some scientific communication without spending money, because we don't have any money for this? Let's start like a hobby. So we start doing some videos. And it was like, okay, how can you make a video? We don't know, let's learn, let's go to YouTube tutorials. And we start, we wanted to do something different. And sometimes we see that science is told, but rarely we can see the faces of the people who do the science, or very rarely also the people who might make the science have the chance to tell their own science. So we're like, why don't we interview those people, right? So during the last 3 years, I have interviewed a lot of scientists, and the idea is for them to tell their own science, to tell their stories, to tell their anecdotes. What is behind the results? What are the difficulties of doing science? What's the process? Failures. I think that's very important, and it's a part of science that sometimes we don't tell. Sometimes we only tell about the success of science, right? The result, when P is below 0.05. But we don't tell everything that is underneath that. I think is important to tell to the people what's science about. So since then, we have been publishing videos, like one video, at least one video every week. And the idea is to show different scientists their perspectives. And unfortunately, we have been having, like, especially in social media, a good impact. We have a lot of comments, and people ask questions, and also the scientists are like saying, "Oh, that was really interesting because way more people saw the video than the paper that the video is about." And then we were like, okay, this is good, fine, videos, but what about real interaction with people? Let's do something about that. So we started these science cafes. Of course, we didn't invited the concept of science cafe, but we saw that there were not many science cafes in Colombia, at least in Bogota, in the city that 8 million people live here. And we start looking around if there were science cafes, and we didn't see many. I didn't find any science cafes. So we decided to start once a month this event in a bar, in a huge bar/restaurant, where we invite a panel of people that includes scientists, but also non-scientists that specialize in a scientific topic. And then we discuss different topics related to science in front of people, where people are drinking beer or having an empanada or something. And at the end, we give the chance people to ask questions to the panelists. And we also ask questions to the public. And it has been a really, really great opportunity to communicate science to people that are not scientists. Because we ask the people that are like, what do you do? And we have yoga teachers, we have architects, engineers, and of course also scientists. So it's been a success. Like every month we have more or less like 200 people in these events. And we have some people have invited us to organize these cafes outside Bogota in different cities, different regions. And the most pleasing thing for us is that students from other regions have contacted us to help them to organize their own science cafes. So I think that's one of the best ways to communicate science beyond internet, specifically here in Latin America, when sometimes it's difficult to access to internet in some areas, is to organize this kind of events, like live in the square, in the middle of the little towns and in your neighborhood. I think it's a good way to communicate science using storytelling, as we have seen in other talks today. So more recently, we also were interested in serving as a platform for other people to write blogs about science, mostly like local science or science that is related to everyday lives of here in Colombia. So we have been hosting this blog for people to write there, and like anybody can send as a text, and then we have our great editor Natalia Gutierrez Pinto, and then we publish that and people read it, and it's great. So that's also an interesting Ciencia Café Paso Merced, the blogs. Also, 3 weeks ago, it's very recent, we started also a new initiative called Sumersaurio Kids. Sumersaurio is this guy. but for kids, and it's videos focused on kids. We were listening before also that it's very important to ask yourself, who is your public? There's not such a thing as the general public. Who is your public? So we're also thinking it would be interesting to have a YouTube channel dedicated for kids. So this is called Sumersario Kids, and we have found that these days, with these very weird days with the pandemic, a lot of parents are looking for science content for kids. So our approach is to have some scientists and some kids explaining a scientific topic, but the kids are going to achieve or perform experiments. And we didn't know how people will respond to this, if we will succeed or not. But until now, we've seen some people send us pictures of the kids doing the experiments. And I think it's a good way to communicate to a different public. So this is also something new that we have been doing. And more recently, we have been able to appear in, and we didn't expect that ever this to happen, in national TV. So what happened? What happened is that, like 2 years ago, the Ministerio de Ciencia, Tecnología e Innovación, they saw some of our videos and they invited us to participate in this like scientific communication show for kids to be presented on TV. And we were like, what? Who? Us? But we don't know how to do anything of this. And they said, we saw your videos and maybe it can work. And yeah, now they're showing this in some channel, and I think it's very positive that well, some of the things, like this pandemic has shown like horrible things, but also has shown that some parts, at least in Colombia, some areas of Colombia have difficulties of education. Everybody knows. And now with the pandemic, it's very difficult for some people to have access to good education. In the past year in Colombia, at least, there was a strong problem in public TV to bring educational content to people, because TV was the only way for people to get access to education. And now they're trying, it's like we're in a time machine. We're seeing again in public, specifically in public channels, more and more content focused on education. And I think we scientists can also participate on that. So what I wanted to wrap up to say is that sometimes when we do science, we are like repeating what others have done before, and is okay. What I have to do is to publish papers and go to conferences and keep doing that until I die. But I think today, now we see the consequences of lack of communication of our research to the people, and also for us to receive communication from the outside. That was, and I think we as scientists can do a lot and different ways to communicate. We have seen today, we can write, we can make videos, we can make stories, comics. There's so many ways we can communicate better our science. So that's what I wanted to tell you about Ciencia Café para su merced. It's a way to communicate science, and we didn't spend any money doing this. So that's what I wanted to tell you. Thank you very much.
Wow, Carlos, that's incredible. What you've done there, that's really impressive. And I think that as soon as I get home, I'm going to start looking up the videos so I can show them to my kids. Congratulations to you and the team. Truly fantastic stuff. If anybody has any questions specific for Carlos, please raise your hand, or write in the question and answers box. Remember, you can do so in English or in Spanish. I think Carlos speaks a little bit of Spanish. It might be a bit rusty, but he'll get by. Are there any questions for Carlos? If not, we can move on to a more broader discussion, if that's okay with everybody. Let's wait and see if a question comes in. So shall we move on to the broader discussion? We have a few questions that people have been asking over the course of this session. Thank you very much for posting those questions. The first one, which I think could go to everybody here, is from Pedro Ivo Monico. And he asks Ian, but I think it goes to everybody, to give advice to a young Latino American scientist that loves to teach and spread science, but don't have any funds to do so. And I think this is probably something that we can all talk about and discuss, how to start off with so little, as Carlos was talking about. And if anybody has any suggestions for young people starting out, I think they would love to hear from each of you that have been so successful.
I think Carlos, everybody really got it. It's just do it. That's the democratization of the internet really helps with this. But I think my personal advice will be, think very well about what kind of communications you want to do. Is it comic? Is it blogs? Is it video? Figure out how it's done backwards. So, okay, how will it look? What do I need to get to this finished product? And make it really cheap and quick, and you will learn what works and what doesn't over time. And just, that's the best way, I would say. Cheap, quick, to the point, figure out what doesn't work quickly, and in a year's time, you'll know what you're doing.
So not be a perfectionist, essentially, at first.
And I also would say that at the beginning, don't expect you will have thousands of people liking your videos or going to your events, because this is a process, right? So I would say keep doing it. And yeah, first of all, as Ian said, just the hardest thing is to start, right? You have to start, and once you started, keep going, be constant, and you'll eventually will see you'll improve. When I see my first videos, I cannot see them like, oh my God, what is horrible. But you have to improve, and you'll see that you will have some results.
Yes, you really don't need very expensive equipment. Just start off with the camera on your laptop or phone, or borrow some equipment from someone. And then as you learn, you will know what kind of things are important to get and what kind of things aren't so important.
And also you can look for an art student and make a collaboration. I think they will be super happy to be invited to create a project with a scientist, I'm sure.
I think one of the themes that's coming out of all of your discussions is the need for openness and collaboration across different sectors of society and different peoples. Everybody here has shown that collaboration is really important to successful communication. Suzette, do you have anything to add?
No, but there was a specific question that came in for you, Carlos, from Beth, asking what are your most popular topics now that you've developed quite a portfolio?
Well, it depends, because we have so many different topics, but the videos, at least from the video perspective, one of the more popular ones is about our history. It's called Bogota on the Water, our city. And I think it's because most people don't have a clue about our geological history. Most people don't know that the Andes didn't existed. Most people didn't know that where Bogota is today was water before. And I think it's one of the reasons why Catalinas and Suzette's video is so amazing because it shows what happened during those times, and people can't believe, like, what, we were underwater, cannot believe. And I think that topic it interests a lot of people because they cannot believe like how different it was. It's funny because in that video, Bogota underwater, I did some really I took Google Earth and because I wanted to show how Bogota would look underwater. So I started doing some very super basic animation compared to Catalina's work, where I would put like a blue, like a blue square, and since you can put it up or down, it would look like it was actually underwater. But I wish I could collaborate someday with Catalina to make a awesome video.
But it shows that actually something very simply made was very effective to.
Yeah, yeah. You could do animations even with PowerPoint. So yeah, certainly you don't have to work only at the level of Catalina, but you can also do different things.
We have another question from Catalina Gonzalez, who says, hi, an excellent job. And she asks, how do you manage to reach a wide public, especially in countries where rural people have less access to such resources like the internet and other educational resources? Do you have any tips and clues for reaching people in those kinds of situations?
Something that I want. Yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
First, I will say
Catalina,
that,
go first.
Thank you. I'll say that we can, as scientists, create festivals. I insist that collaborations are the best. So if we create festivals with local governments to teach something, we can also bring artists and scientists. I think this is the best way to get local people that don't have any access to internet. I don't know. I think that's my recommendation. Carlos.
I would say also at least in Colombia, a lot of rural areas have a heavy use of radio to inform themselves. And I think it's not very difficult for us, for example, to make a podcast about science, about a local topic or something that has some relation with people's lives, and then communicate with the local radio station and say, hey, what's your day where you have less content? What about if I give you every week one podcast, can you like put in your station? Probably will say yes, please. And I think that would be a good way to do it. And another one is when we go to do fieldwork, why don't we give talks to kids in local schools? I wish I would have that idea before when I was doing a lot of fieldwork, but I think it's another way.
For me will be, I honestly don't believe there's a broad audience, and that is my entrepreneurship hat on. Just focus on the people you want to reach in these places and ask how are they already getting messages. As Carlos said, radio, in the context of Panama, WhatsApp and Instagram seems to be working where radio isn't in some places. So you have to look at where your audience is already exists and planting your flag. Does that mean that you're going to collaborate with other people who might have similar needs that you can fulfill for them, or create an entirely new thing with people in the area? So that's my contribution.
Thanks, everyone. Anyone else like to contribute to that question before we move on to the next one? Okay, we have a question from Maria Torres. She says, hola, great panel. Thank you for organizing. I would like to know recommendations about grad programs to study science communication. I'm looking forward to a program that teaches animation design skills, but also academic and research skills. Any recommendations are welcome. Ian, would you like to start this one?
I don't know from experience, but I've heard that the science communication masters in the University of the West of England is talked about in high regards. But this might be a heretic thing to say, but I don't think you need to go to university to learn this, especially when it's actually a toolbox of skills. If you want to learn design, illustration, and it's all about the basics. Find out online resources of how to do that, learn those skills, learn the research side of things on your own, and then just combine them. I will say might take longer on your own, but might be cheaper. That's what I got. And if I can help you with that. I can have a longer conversation with anybody who would like to pick my brain on it. So I dropped my email and contact on the chat.
Yeah, you can learn by internet, YouTube, lynda.com. It's a lot of videos available for animation. But if you still want to go to the university, which country do you want to live first? Because United States, it's a bunch of universities with arts. You will be welcome as a scientist if you have a portfolio. England also has a lot of communication universities, master's degrees, Spain, Australia, Netherlands. So by my experience, I just started looking for places where I could be accepted as a biologist, and then write a letter to someone who is sharing my interest as an artist, a professor, and then see if this person is interested in working with me, and then just apply and look for a fellowship or grant. So it's several steps that you have to do to get into the university. But right now, I mean, you can start by online. There are a bunch of videos and tutorials where you can get what you want.
It does seem a little bit like a need. People are looking for that sweet overlap between having a science background and being able to communicate it. So you all have a very unique skill in that sense of being able to, or having taken the steps to communicate beyond the usual that is known in the scientific world. And there's another question from Catalina that kind of goes into that a little bit, is that how could all of these ways of communicating science be taken into evaluation and promotion processes and help to diversify the concept of success in science, traditionally based on age indexes, as Beatrice also said, like, you know, going beyond publishing somewhere, but actually going for a different audience. So how can science be more open to accepting or seeing this as a very valuable step that is actually very much needed, as Carlos said?
It's a great question. Thanks for saying that, Suzette, and thanks for your question, Catalina. Maybe Beatrice could answer this with a specific point about whether that article that you wrote is actually recognized as a scientific output or not as a scientist.
Well, the answer is that I don't know. I think that this is the type of thing that I guess we're all thinking about, that we believe that we should do this, but we're not getting any credit for it. I think the way I see it is that this is the cherry on the cake. So if you're amazing and you have 1,000 papers in Nature and so on, and then you're competing with somebody who has exactly the same amount, and then you have this science thing, you know, science outreach, then you get the job. But you are not gonna get the job if you have 5 papers less, but you have this extra, even though that, you know, took you more time to do it than publishing all the papers. So yeah, I would like to know also how to make this better. And I mean, this paper, it is it's also very recent, so I don't know what the consequences of my paper are, right? But of course it doesn't it doesn't have an impact factor as far as I know, and it's not going to be cited. So it's only this line in your CV that you say, oh, I do science outreach, and people are going to like it. But again, it would only be important if you're competing with somebody who has as many papers as you, and then you have this cherry on the icing on the cake or whatever. So it is a hard thing to know what how can you make this. Everybody says all the funding bodies tell you that you need to do science outreach and so on, and you need to learn all these things and spend on your time, but at the end it's not really yet giving credit as far as I can feel.
Yes, I quite agree. It's I quite often hear that I should spend less time on this, and but I think it's very important as well, because if you don't tell people about your research, it's going to be harder to find. And I find that maybe I'm getting some citations through people seeing the video abstract or those kinds of things, and I think it does pay off, and people will try to approach you for collaborations, or but it's this kind of hidden kind of benefit, and I agree we need to find some kind of way to yeah, to measure that, or to see that value in there. I don't know how.
Yeah, I think it's Catalina. Me?
I think both are important. I think for science it's very important to have index publication. So by our experience or how we have been experimenting with this, basically, it's having this publication for scientists, but also we are looking for magazines that are for divulgation, for open, wide public, making a transformation of the article in terms of language. And you can get more people, and still it's a publication, like a scientific publication, with all the heaviness. I don't know how to say that, but at the same time, you can get more audiences that are interested by reading Muy Interesante or Nat Geo. I don't know. It's like a very wide audience. So I think for that reason we have to make collaborations and do both. No? Both. That is very important, because science is science. I mean, science needs the structure, science needs the test, science needs the data, science needs to show the results in a specific way, but at the same time can give a round and show the data in a visual way or funny way or interesting way. And the paper, like a magazine publication, we are still connected with the scientific publication. So it's like getting different audiences at the end. Carlos.
I think, yeah, I agree with everything you said before. And I think it's not enough that we start creating content in scientific communication, but also we need some change from top down, like from big institutions. Sometimes big institutions like universities and research centers, they have this inertia of doing things because they have done these things in the past for a long time. So they exactly know, okay, a Q1 paper article has these points and Nature has these points, and we are going to raise your salary because you have all these publications, but it's not there yet. Okay, scientific communication should also have some impact on researchers. And when we start seeing that, probably we'll see more incentives for scientists to try to communicate their science. So it has to be, I think, bottom up, but also from top down. And sometimes you see, even like I think in NSF is now giving points to communicate the results as well. So I think it's going to be a gradual thing, because otherwise we'll keep sitting this wall between the public and science.
I think that's right, Carlos. I think with money you can do anything, really. So if you write into the grants that you write specifically money to hire an illustrator, a filmmaker, somebody to do outreach for your project beforehand, then that's a really important way to move ahead. Thank you very much for your answers. Does anybody else want to contribute to that question?
I wanted to add that I feel like now we're just at the beginning of something that is not developed yet, and then we as scientists are for the first time asked to talk to this broader audience and so on, but it has not been figured out yet how. And I mean, I did my PhD on fish biology, and I'm working on this. I have need to discover how to make videos and so on, right? Everything is on us, and it's still, we're asked to do it, but we're still not given the credit to do it. So I think that eventually it should come that it is given credit, and not only that, but that the university has a creative person, right? Like a science communicator who will go there and would say, okay, this paper, you have it, I'm gonna make this video or this, you know, this whatever article and so on. That is not us. I don't have the education. I cannot just do like Catalina, do like one PhD on something and then go and do another PhD on a completely different topic. And, you know, it is, and of course I would like to do it and I would like to learn, and I've done all this, how to make a video for science outreach. And I went through the course and I did half a video, and of course it never went anywhere, and I cannot imagine having to do one every week and trying to, you know, still publish my work. So it is, and also of course if you have a team and you have many people and you help each other, but when you're like just me, and you know, and it's all the weight on you, that's it's a very difficult thing to do, and a lot of time goes and no credit. So I think that soon it should come more help, I think, but of course I don't know when that would happen, but I hope it was coming.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Beatrice, because of course you mentioned the university. Like, what's the support of the university? Does the university have a program even to have some simple courses for PhD students? Are there initiatives to at least talk to also the PIs of projects so that they support that PhD students do that? So it's indeed a process, but something else that you brought up, of course, is what is the force that will make this higher up on the agenda, and that kind of comes to a question that Talita raised, is saying we're all living in a crisis of distrust in science. We scientists, we're doing the videos, illustrations, infographics, but are these things enough to bridge the gap between science and society? And maybe that's the extra force that scientists are getting from society, as Carlos said, that there are more people actually looking for the truth and actually reaching out. So now maybe it's a two-way of not only us shouting out, but also maybe a bigger public wanting to hear more from us. Does that resonate well with you, Carlos?
Yeah. Agree 100%.
Were your PhDs or are your PhD supervisors supportive of you, Julia, doing the extra work within your project?
Yes, to a certain extent. I mean, of course, they're more supportive as I'm more productive in the scientific parts as well. Yeah, I think I also heard that you need to just tick a few boxes to have a diverse CV, and it doesn't matter how much effort you put into each of these boxes, as long as you can just have something in your science outreach part of your CV, Yeah, I think that's more of a common idea about it. It's a bit of a balance, because since I'm so early in my career, spending a lot of time on making videos does take away time from writing papers that are the thing that I'm being judged most on. So maybe it becomes less of a problem later in my career. I think they're supportive overall, but it's a bit complex.
Thank you, Julia, for that. Well, we've been nearly 2 hours now. So if everybody agrees, maybe we should move on.
Yeah.
I have to apologize, my internet is unstable. My computer keeps telling me that I am unstable, but I knew that already. Okay, so I think, why don't we wrap it up? Thank you, everybody. Thank you, the panelists, everyone, for joining us. What a great mix of different approaches and different styles of communicating science. I think we could go on talking for hours, and we could all learn from each other. And that's one of the most important things, is that we should always be open to learning new approaches and listening and communicating with people as well as possible. Suzette, do you want to finish off with any words?
No, a little bit of the background. We had several people asking of the recordings and of the presentations. So the coming days, we will definitely try to share any links so you can look back at anything. We will be tweeting, so you can contact the different people, and also if any other questions also arise. This has been an absolutely fantastic session, and considering the number of attendees we had at the beginning, we were like around 80, it really shows how many people show the interest and have interest, and the many questions that arise. So I wanted to thank everyone of the panel to have joined and showed their experience. And as Aaron said, I would have loved to hear much more, but who knows, in the future we will do another one, and maybe in a different language. But it has been absolutely great, and definitely very motivating for many people. So thanks to everyone, and for Aaron for moderating the session so well. So thank you.
Thank you very much for the invitation. It was great.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, everyone. And thanks to the audience for joining.
Yo.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Ciao.